Today is a very special occasion, I think, for two reasons. This is the first meeting of the Society since Hull became the city of culture for 27 years. And I think the Society certainly made a very important contribution to the application that brought success to the city. The second reason why I think this is a very important occasion, the previous 3 times we have had material objects. Today we have a focus now on an individual in the person of Betty Mackereth. Betty was appointed by Philip in 1957 as his secretary and fulfilled that role for the following 27 years. Now, this year as well has a particular resonance for me because it is just 50 years ago that I first came to Hull from Glasgow and first met Philip Larkin as a new professor with a new subject to discuss library needs. And that meant, of course, that I met Betty for the first time, the guardian of the hallowed portals of the librarian. And so I'm looking forward tremendously to this afternoon's programme, when Betty, I know, is going to recall, in conversation with James Booth and Graham Chesters, some memories of those 27 years. So please welcome now Betty, James and Graham.
Thank you, Eddie. The format is that James and I are going to be in conversation with Betty for about 40 minutes, and then after a short intermission, there'll be, where we'll all say where we are, I hope there'll be a question and answer session where Betty's prepared to answer any reasonable questions that are asked. So, let us start. Betty, you feel relaxed because it's just the 3 of us. I see you've brought something along on the table, which are quite enigmatic objects, and I think perhaps it'd be a good idea to start explaining what these are.
Yes. Well, let's move forward. I can't remember when this arrived on my desk, but it was in the very early days. And it did eventually hold a lot of, after he'd been to conferences, with his name. And the caricature of Philip Larkin is very good, really. He's long-faced and...
For those on this side.
Anyway,
droopy-eared dog.
I think he did provide it. And he also, sometime later, provided this. He said, that represents you. You keep everybody at bay. So...
This is an alligator. So, one self-portrait and a comment on yourself, Betty. I'm sure you were very successful at that. Can I go back to that point that Eddie mentioned all those years ago when you first became Philip's secretary? And how did that happen? Where were you before?
Well, it was after I'd won the war, I came back and they wanted me to be a clippy on the buses. I said, certainly not, I'm not 21 yet. I was actually about a week off 21 and they couldn't redirect me into war work. So I said, no, I want to go. I've had secretarial training. I said, I want to go into an office. So I went to the Kingston upon Hull. I don't know why it isn't called Kingston upon Hull now, because in the transport department where I worked, we always had to address everything Kingston upon Hull. Anyway, the transport department, and we worked very hard. I was there about, I'm trying to remember how many years I was there. But anyway, that doesn't matter, does it? And then I went for an interview for secretary to the university librarian. And I was appointed. 1957. 67.
57.
Yes. And I was absolutely astounded. They were laid back. They didn't do any the chat. The issue their staff talk. Nobody did any work. Well, they didn't appear to. And I did Philip's letters for the day, and I would say, yes, I've done those. I've done this. Now then, what shall I do now? And he got a bit fed up with this. So he went to the Institute of Education, which was across the road, and took one of their books that we hadn't got in the main library. And he brought it across. He said, here. He said, we haven't got this book in the library. He said, copy it. I will have it bound and put on our shelves. So that kept me quiet. I can't really say how far I got. I wouldn't think I got very far at all, because it wasn't long afterwards before we started having to prepare for the move to the first building in 1959. So it was, you know, I should think 2 or 3 pages. Anyway, I don't think the book is in the university library, sure. So,
Betty, at the interview, you told me sometime before the other interviewer made a comment on you afterwards, which I think stuck in my mind. It's rather evocative.
yes, it was one of the assistant registrars also interviewed me with Philip Larkin. And he said to Philip, he said, if you have A, she'll be with you for life. If you have B, oh, well, she didn't say life for a long time. If you have B, he said, you will, within 4 years, you'll be having a new secretary. So, I never thought that
And you were able.
I would end my days there.
Well, Philip did say in a letter to his mother that he thought you would probably stay. You'd probably stay for life, just after he'd appointed you. So he must have thought so.
There we are. Anyway, I did. I stayed until I retired in 1984.
Betty, I'm sure we're all, or most of us here, will have heard the name. We're all eager to hear about Miss Porter.
Oh, Miss Porter. Well, we were in the, I mean, if people can remember the original layout of the university, the building on the, looking at it from the road, the building on the right, the building on the left. Get this right. And Philip's office was in the building nearest to town, and he overlooked what we called the soup plate then, which was lawns with steep sides, and students used that for relaxing in between their studies, etc. And Miss Porter was a very voluptuous young lady, and he would pick up 2 pieces of magnifying glass you like it, and survey the scene. And Miss Porter was one of them. And when we did move to the new library, there was a room on the back staircase which was set aside and furnished for if any of the staff were ill, with a couch. And that became Miss Porter's room. Now, I don't know whether it's still there, the room. I've no idea. I think the back staircase is still there. Richard will know about it. But that was Miss Porter's room.
You referred just now, Betty, to the building of the new library, the first great building project before the main tower there. Can you tell us how much Philip was involved in the planning of that, and what detail did he go into, and did he have much to do with architects?
Oh, well, I wish I could remember the name of the architect, but he was a sort of an Edwardian gentleman from London, and he was really, really very nice. And I don't know anything about the planning of it, but he allowed Philip to choose colours. And so Philip said, right, on the ground floor, the stack ends of the shelves shall be pink, and on the second floor they will be blue, and in the lower room it will be purple, and the archive room it'll be yellow. Well, when we changed to the next architects, everything was grey. The flooring and everything. But Philip was involved with it very much. Shelves were 3 foot long, and he had a series of boxes made 3 foot long by the workshops. Handles on the end, big labels on. And so we all took part in the move, and you moved us. And it all went down to Hammond's van that plied between the old library and the new library, backwards and forwards on the university site. Of course, there was no Larkin building then, there was nothing. So that's fine. He was very much involved in that, and he was an organiser really. He did come into his own there.
We need to remind ourselves, he wasn't very old when he got the job here, was he?
Sorry?
He wasn't very old when he got the job here in Hull.
Well, I don't know, because he got in before I got.
He was in his early 30s, then, wasn't he?
No, well, he would be, no, I don't know. Anyway, he was born in 1922, work it out.
As his secretary, it's the job of the secretary obviously keep secrets and act as an alligator in the doorway and so on. And Philip will have talked to you a lot over the years. How much did he confide in you about his relationship with Monica and Maeve, and how much of that did you feel that
Well,
you knew about?
he lived alone, and I felt that I was a sounding board, because he would come in and, whereas the tale he would relate to a wife or companion, oh, it's this, oh, that, and so, and this. Not only made Monica, but other people who bothered him. So that was the first part of the day was taken up with him really sort of thinking, trying to clear his mind of what he was doing or what he was going to do or whatever.
What, complaining about the fix he was in, or
Complaining
about the fix he was in with Monica, or what kind of thing?
or what?
Well, complaining about the way he got himself, as it were, tangled up.
Oh! Well, I mean, it seems quite natural for men to do that sort of thing. He was one of the pioneers.
You've often said that Larkin had a very sharp sense of humour.
Well, he did have a good sense of humour. And when we moved into the new library, the phone rang, say, 9:05 in the morning after I'd got the post sorted. And sometimes it was to say, is there anything interesting in the post today? But other times he would say, I've got this geezer. He's been here all night under the table. He says his name's Philip Larkin. And that was Philip just acting a part. He was quite good at mimicry as well. So he would act a Yorkshire yobbo.
Did he mimic anybody on Senate and
Oh!
meet?
Well, he used to come back from Senate and fly and say, so, especially there was a Scottish professor, I can't think of his name, but, so-and-so said so-and-so, and he would imitate his, what he'd said at Senate. But, Sir Brynmore Jones, who was the Vice-Chancellor, who took a great interest in the library and was always sort of dropping in, and he would come in and say, I'm very worried, Philip, very worried. That was Philip being Welsh. But yes, he did that. I don't know. I think probably, if there's Scottish or Welsh or something different, but not plain-speaking people.
You're making it sound as though he was extremely easy to work for, and you got on extremely well, and he was a bit of a laugh. I mean, he has a reputation of being a very melancholic and depressed sort of character. Did you presumably you?
Well, he was a man of moods, and when he came in the morning, he would come through my office into his office, and I took him and looked and I thought, this is the day when, he will go, he sits down at his desk, and he's just staring at the picture that he borrowed from the fine art collection on the other side of the wall of his room. He had a big room, very, very nicely appointed. And he would just stare at it. He was something, well, he got fits of depression. And I would think, oh boy. And if I had to go into his room to get a file or anything like that, I would go in, open the filing drawer at the bottom of his desk, take out what I wanted, go. He was never aware of it, I don't think. But, I suppose, he couldn't help these. I suppose he was in a tangle probably. He was worried about his family, his mother, his father had already died. I don't know.
But he had an interesting attitude towards work, didn't he? I mean, with Toes and Toes Revisited, did he work himself out of these depressions? I mean, did he commit himself to his job?
Oh, he was a he was a librarian. I must say, when his deputy librarian, Brandon Moore, went to Canada, 1980 or something, to look at the GM installation there for putting everything onto a line. It was wonderful the way they worked together, because he was an old-fashioned librarian and she was a new-fashioned librarian. And so between them, they modernised the library.
They're one of the first, I think, one of the first.
We were the first in the country. The whole university was the first in the country to go online with the books. And that was a lot of hard work as well, organising that, because we had people from the Labour Exchange to something that would work, you know, trying to get them used to working. And they would come in and they would have to copy the cards, the indexes, and there were all the mistakes they made. And they all have to be gone through and corrected. When we had, you know, the foreign languages, they got experts in to look at those. But it was amazing, the people who came for work experience, that's what it was, work experience.
Brenda Moon must have been absolutely crucial, mustn't she? Because temperamentally, Philip was very Luddite in relation to technology and so on. I mean, when he dictated minutes, for instance, to you, you were saying...
Oh, yes. Philip used to... He had a carpet in his room. Well, he had a big square carpet in his room. And behind his desk was a strip of carpet. He wore it out. He walked up and down, up and down, up and down. And when he dictated, this was the first thing I knew really before we moved. My mind used to drift off and I used to think, oh yes, so and so, because every word had to be right. I rarely had a draft which had to be redrafted. It was perfect when he dictated it.
There are some genres, aren't there, where that kind of perfectionism isn't really required. Do you think his minutes would stand up to examination as good minutes, or were they too perfect and it had to be spent too long over them?
All I know is that I rarely wrote the minutes, only when, for some reason or other, he couldn't. But I used to take the notes, always go to the committee meetings, take the notes. So-and-so said this was brought up, da. And then I presented him with these pages of notes, and he would then dictate from them the minutes. When Miss Cumming was there, we used to have the minutes bound in quinquennia. 5 years, Miss Cumming's 5 years was a volume like that. Philip's 5 years was a volume like that, enormous, because, well, it was wordy.
Did he ever get used to a dictaphone? Did he ever move
Oh, no. Well, yes, he did get used to the dictaphone, but when when I first went to 1957, 67, I'll get the year right eventually. And he said, oh, I've got to do estimates for equipment for the finance office. He said, can we think of anything we want? I said, yes, a dictating machine. He said, a dictating machine? I couldn't possibly dictate to an inanimate object. And we didn't get one until we got the new library, and then one was automatically supplied for him. And then he did use it.
He told you, did he not, that the people that you were to put through automatically on the phone to him would be the Palace, Downing Street. What was his attitude towards his growing fame in the outside world? I mean,
Oh yes, well there were certain people I knew he would speak to, local people, certain people. Yes, you can put them through. But the Palace, Downing Street, the Vice-Chancellor and the Chairman of the Library Committee, they had to be put through immediately. All the rest had to be, you know, well, I knew his chums who would ring up. But anyone else I had to prevaricate and say, well, just one moment, I'll see if the librarian's in, or if he's available.
And when he received his various awards, obviously CBE and later on the Queen's Medal, did he seem delighted? Did he appreciate this kind of fame?
Well, he was offered the OBE, I don't know when, but I remember Eric Walter White was the secretary of the Poetry Society in London, and I remember he evidently said to Philip, refuse, not DOB for you, CBE for you. So Philip wrote and said, thank you very much, but no. And it was some years later when I took a phone call, about 2:15 it would be, in an afternoon. This is Downing Street. Could you let me have Philip Larkin's private address? Now, I never struck me that it could have been a joke or anything like that. I said, certainly, and I gave him the address from Newland Park. And when he walked in the office, I said to him, you're going to get the CBE. He said, I'm what? I said, you're going to get the CBE. So he said, how did you... I said, I've had Downing Street on the telephone wanting your address. And I said, you see, you will get an offer of the CBE. And he did.
And later on he was offered the Order of Merit, wasn't he?
Oh, well, he got that, yes. He never actually received that, did he? Because I think he was ill before he received it. But he was on about, you know, he didn't have a night. I said, Philip, I said, the knighthood. I said, the penny. I said, there are only 12 people at any one time that the sovereign nominates for an Order of Merit. And I said, that's where you got. I said, that's wonderful.
Was this his jealousy of Kingsley Amis getting...
Well, I thought Kingsley Amis had it, but I don't know. You said that you didn't think he had.
I don't know. Was Amis knighted? Yes, he was. He was knighted, yes. So that would have been when it would have come out, wouldn't it?
Yes.
He would have been a bit jealous.
Yeah. Well, there you are. He always waited for something a bit better.
You're right about the Order of Merit, of course.
Yeah. Betty, when I first met Philip Larkin, I was a junior lecturer and he was already famous. And this is in 1972, and I just come from Belfast. Of course, he'd been in Belfast. And it's about then that he received the news that he would have to move from Pearson Park. And he ended up, of course, in Newland Park, and I wonder if you've got any
It's
view.
moved. I mean, he loved the university flats round Pearson Park. He liked Pearson Park. I mean, there are certain poems that, you know, relate to it. He was very happy there. In fact, one night, he used to entertain us, half a dozen members of staff at one time. And I remember one time, Mary Wrench, as she was, she became Mary Jo, and her husband was there. And we went for evening coffee and chats and one thing and another. And on the way out, he was not on the ground floor, he was on the first floor. He said, "Oh, will you just put the milk instruction out for the milkman?" And Stephen had it in his hand, like this. Philip came in the next day. "I've had 8 pints of milk delivered this morning." And he was absolutely furious. And I just burst out laughing. I thought it was so funny. He was livid. I think if that man had crossed his path at that time, there would have been a murder.
He sounds quite sociable, you know, inviting people round. I mean,
yes.
Was he very sociable with his staff? And did he get on with most staff in the library?
He was very good with the staff. We had, in the first part of the library, we had a communal staff room in the basement. And he would come down, and he would, "Yes, hello, hello, hello." Always acknowledge people as he walked down. And because he always interviewed staff then. But it was when we had a staff of over 100 eventually, and he was, you know, the reader services man or cataloguing, or someone else would always do the interviewing. So he didn't know the staff before they were appointed. But he was always very friendly with the early staff. Yes.
Coming up to the present, the statue outside is now a real landmark. I believe you have a little bit of a history in relation to this whole idea of the statue, and perhaps you can tell us what you think Philip might have made of this.
I received the letter that no doubt quite a few people received. They're going to have a statue of Philip Larkin Society, and I thought, rubbish! I don't know whether I actually wrote.
Yes, you did.
Did I? I wrote and said, "Who would ever come to Hull to see a lump of metal?" I said, "People do not come to Hull." I said, "That's one of the reasons he was so happy in the place." Nobody could drop in on him, you know. He'd been in Leicester, he'd been in Belfast. And obviously, you know, he'd sort of come in. Nobody could do that about Hull. They had to get a special train or whatever to get here. So I just thought it was rubbish.
Do you think
I'm sorry, Graham.
do you think he wouldn't have liked it? Do you think he would not have liked the actual statue?
I don't really know. I wouldn't like to predict whether he thinks it's good. Do you think it's good, Philip? Or whether he... I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's all right, but I don't think it's... Well, I don't know really what to expect.
I think we'll take all right. All right. I don't think he's going to get better than that. Yeah, thank you, Betty. Can you, in the very sad days after Philip died in 1985, I know it's well reported that you had the task of shredding his diaries, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
How did that happen?
Well, I knew that he wanted his diaries, he wanted them disposed of. And I know why, because he would write down very personal things in his diaries. I've no idea what he did write, but he wanted them. And Monica knew this as well. And I went round to Newland Park and I said, if you let me have the diaries, I said, I've arranged for the university to put the shredder in his room, and I said, I will spend the day shredding his diaries. And she let me have them. That was it. A lot of people said I shouldn't have done. He didn't want it. And I must say, I thought, I wonder if he ever said about me. or about, you know, and I thought, no, he's there watching you. So I never read a word of those diaries. I couldn't tell you what was in them, but I only know that Philip would have been very honest with his diary.
Could I slip in a little unscripted question here? If he is looking down now, and obviously when you were shredding the diaries just after his death, this will have been a very poignant aspect to it. In his relationship with you, he was obviously very much taken by how full of vitality you were and how full of beat. He says in letters, doesn't he, how healthy you are, and you gave him advice on health and so on. And I've just come across here a little documentary sidelight on that, a letter to his first love, the Penelope Scott Stokes in Oxford, who of course he had a brief correspondence with in the 1970s. And she took up golf at that point. She'd had a hip operation, I think, and it helped. How's the golf? I think I said my loaf-haired secretary had taken up the game and thrashes about manfully or womanfully, but I don't know her handicap. A picture of Tony Jacklin smiles on her labours. Have you still got that picture of Tony Jacklin?
And having seen him on Strictly Come Dancing.
But you were so much more active than Philip, and it was obviously
Well,
an intimate part of your relationship, wasn't it?
I mean, he was a librarian, and books were everything to him. And he read an enormous amount. I mean, I was just glad to get out of the fresh air. And when I gave up badminton, I thought, oh, golf, and it was lovely. And that's why my legs are in such a bad state. But, yes, and I never really realised why he called me low-fare. Because I know he had a photograph taken sometime, for some reason or other. And he said, I always went every Friday to the hairdresser. And he said, will you ask them to do it low-fare? Oh, well, I don't know what I look like. So I sort of had it done and I don't know what I look like, but anyway, he didn't complain, but low fare, so it's better that than a lot of descriptions, isn't it?
Yes, and it's made you. You didn't need a reason to be famous, Betty, but everybody knows that phrase, loaf-haired secretary, and I've wondered why.
Oh.
Yeah. I think James and I have come to the end of our questions, and just over 40 minutes. So, but before we ask you if you've got any other questions, and even necessarily questions, it might be commentaries or additions to what Betty has said, we'd like to present you with something, Betty, and James is going to do it. This is a surprise. It's not This Is Your Life, don't worry.
Betty, here is hat. Can you hear? I haven't got the microphone, it's rather tricky to do. That's something of an explanation of the low hair, actually. we decided to commemorate the occasion by doing a little presentation. Sorry, Betty, you don't need to see it. Which is made up of photographs of Betty and, in some cases, Philip, and also some of the quotes, particularly in letters to his mother, but also some of the poems. Interestingly, the top one here, which is the loaf-haired one, the extract from the letter to his mother in June 1964. This is when the Monitor programme was being made.
Yes.
He wrote to his mother, "The BBC stood Betty a special hairdo so that she could appear as my loaf-haired secretary."
I didn't remember that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Right. Over to you. Any questions or comments that you might like to raise with
I'd like
Betty?
to ask a question. What would Philip Larkin have thought of Kingston upon Hull getting City of Culture 2017?
Right. Betty, what would Philip Larkin made of Kingston upon Hull getting UK City of Culture in 2017?
Oh, I don't think he disliked Hull, but he just liked being in Hull. And I mean, when you read his poem and coming round by the Humber and one thing and another, and he certainly enjoyed the Holderness countryside. He had a bicycle when I first knew him, and he used to go out on the weekends and cycle for miles round, visiting churches mostly. But I don't think he disliked Hull, but he was happy to be here, out of the way.
And I expect everybody has seen the little film that helps support the case, which begins and ends with Larkin. And I've asked myself what he would have thought of that, but I think the city owes him a lot for what he said about the place. Thank you. Any... John?
Betty, I remember on Larkin's 60th birthday, I came over to the library to give him a present. It was a jazz LP, and your room was empty. So I, with great nerve, I knocked on the door, and the librarian said, "Come in." And there were the two of you, wait for it, drinking sherry, obviously celebrating his birthday. And I stammered happy birthday and gave him the present. And I remember he said, "This is what you think university life is always like, isn't it, drinking sherry?" I just wonder if you can remember on that occasion if he was particularly happy, or he was gloomy to be 60, or happy still to be alive. Can you recall that?
Tell me what it's
It's John's recalling popping across to the Brimall Jones Library on Philip's 60th birthday, taking him a present, an LP, and meeting you and Philip drinking sherry. Yeah. I didn't say how large the glass was, but I've read this anecdote before. It's quite large glasses. And John's question is, can you remember on how he felt about being 60? Was it a day of celebration? It's to do with aging, I suppose, isn't it? How he felt towards it.
I don't think it. I can't remember that was, you know, it was just another day. I don't think the years really added up. After all, it's no age to be 60, is it?
But now, of course, you're illustrating exactly the poignant point of the poems he wrote to you, aren't you? By dismissing it. He wouldn't have dismissed it at all.
No, but no. I can't remember. I mean, I do remember you coming.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the occasion and us having a drink. And occasionally we used to have a drink to celebrate something or other. But I mean, he was a regular drinker. I mean, he every morning.
Yeah.
every evening back to his gin, and I've only once seen him inebriated of all the times that, you know, when I know he's drunk quite a lot. And that was when we had a staff party, when we had the first move in the little tiny staff room. And he really got tight then. But all the rest of the time he was well able to take it and walk instead of it.
He used to go to the university bar, didn't he? That's
Oh,
it's a
every
regular.
day, every day. He met you and and anyone else who turned up. I used to see them going past the window. At 12:30 there was it was a regular, yes, into the staff house, yes.
Right. Let's move on quickly. Any other points?
Yeah, just an anecdote,
Yes,
please. A friend of mine in Essex recalls that he was an undergraduate at Hull University in Larkin's day, and I said, well, did you know the great man? I don't know if this is typical of Larkin, so did you know the great man? He said, no, and he said, he personally threw me out of the library.
That's just an anecdote about somebody, was Essex?
Essex,
yes. Who talking to somebody who'd been a student at Hull and asked the question, did you know the great man? And he said that he'd been personally thrown out of the library by him.
Really? Did he say why?
Yes, talking. Talking.
For talking?
For talking.
Oh.
Wouldn't do that.
Well, I wouldn't know, because, I mean, to throw you out of the library, there's a long way to go if you've been told. You can, there's certain places where you can talk, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, the reading room, I mean, you wouldn't have to go down the stairs, or unless you opened the window and threw him out.
Do you remember, Betty, when the library was occupied, wasn't it, in 1960?
Oh yes, it was.
How did
Yes.
how
The
did you
students occupied, but not only the library, other university buildings, didn't they? I don't really know why, but yes, he used to go and look at them. Make sure, and they were certainly not allowed on a staff floor or anything like that. They were contained in a public place. Well, you never could tell what.
Before Carol did it.
Yes, I've got two questions. One's quite mundane. I'm wondering about tea and coffee in the day. Was he a big tea drinker? And how much did he have, and did he take sugar? Or in his day, did he use tea as
Did he drink tea or coffee, and did he have sugar in it? With the
I don't think he had sugar. Well, he used to have it, yes. We have our little pantry. Yes, we have a really nice little setup behind the wall. And make him tea in the morning if I didn't do it. One of the other girls who worked with me did.
And did he ever put the kettle on and make tea for other people?
Well, I wouldn't have thought that he actually put the kettle on. But
Sorry, I know it's interesting of his politics. I just wondered if he ever made his cup of tea. And the other question was, and I hope this isn't too personal, so, but once your romantic relationship began, what was your working relationship like? Did that change at all? Or?
No.
No.
I mean, the whole thing was a great surprise to me. Because, I mean, well, 1975. I've been in secretary all that time.
Yeah.
And we went out for Castle Park, Dean and Hook. They were the architects for the second building. And we went out to the Pipe and Glass. And Philip drove. Now that was another thing. at one time, I had a car. The deputy librarian had a car, but his wife was a teacher at Newland, and so the car was always there. And we had a photographer when the second library was occupied. And he had a car. And we were the only two people in the library who had cars. And he used to drive up through the university, and there was a rose bed in front of between the chemistry and library, and park the car in front of the library. And it was amazing that Philip had never driven. He took lessons. He came out in my poor little car and bumped through after the winter time. I mean, there were ruts in the road, holes in the road. Anyway, he took his test and he came in. I walked through my door and I said, "Have you passed?" He said, "I have never yet failed an examination." So that's confidence, isn't it?
But when he drove you back from that occasion, tell us the story.
Oh yes, well, I was forgetting that. Well, when he wrote that, Pauline went as well. She was in charge of the issue desk. We had a jolly evening. The four of them weren't there. I think two of them were there. And he drove us there. I picked Pauline up, then me, and then onto the Pipe and Glass. And coming back, he dropped Pauline off, and then came back into Cottingham. And I thought, well, that's funny. Fancy him doing that. You know, his way is just... Anyway, so he pulled up outside the house and said, "Well, aren't you going to invite me in for coffee?" So I said, "Well, all right." You know, and there you are.
And he broke a saucer.
Well, he broke a saucer, yes. But he said, "Oh, well," he said, "I'm planning this." There you are. He was very secretive in some of his ways. But anyway, I know our working relationship did not change. I mean, he was still the librarian. I referred to him. Well, it was amazing at that time. Everybody was personal names, which, when we first went there, we all referred to him as the librarian. Not by a personal name, but then people blow in. "Oh, how's Philip?" The whole relationship between people changed, didn't it? Not just in the library, everywhere. First names were used all the time. At one time, I was Miss Mackereth, and then when I went to the hairdresser, and then I became Betty, just for no reason at all.
Carol, one last question.
One last question. Is there any truth, Betty, in the suggestion that students used to deliberately take books back late so that Philip would sign the overdue slips?
Is there any truth in the rumour that students used to take books back late so that Philip would sign the overdue slip? It's a way of getting the librarian's signature.
And then sell them at an enormous
They'd be on eBay today, wouldn't they?
Well, I don't know, that must have been in, I can't think, very early. They had nothing to do with the issue desk at all, or signing overdue books or anything else.
So it is just a myth.
It must have been in the very first library.
I don't think it is.
I mean, you know.
I don't think it is a myth, because I have one of these notes. From my period in the university. I arrived in '68, so this would probably have been the '70s, and that is a mechanical stamp signature. It isn't.
Oh, well,
deliberate.
there you are, yes, yes.
So I think it had happened that he
Yes.
Right, well,
Betty, it's a full hour now.
Tea time.
in this tea time, so we mustn't delay the arrival of the afternoon tea. But and there are one or two announcements, I think, that are going to be made. But before those are made, could I, on behalf of everybody, Betty, thank you so much for being so entertaining. And I know you've been a bit nervous about that, but nobody was ever guessed. I think it's been hugely enjoyable. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you'll agree with me that we've had a wonderfully interesting and entertaining afternoon, and we must thank Betty, of course, and Graham and James for conducting it in such a pleasant and non-intrusive manner, and we've been delighted. Thank you so much indeed.
Well, I thank these two for the support when it was first mooted. I said, well, I can't be by myself. I said, I've got to have somebody to hold my hand. Thank you, both of you.